ви довіряєте найменше. Я пам'ятаю, що за останні 10 років там два лідери були, це були адвокати і фінансисти, інвестпрофесіонали. Тому, в принципі, це дуже важливі такі питання, які перед нами стоять. Чому Cfa Society Ukraine? Ми як частина глобальної організації Cfa Institute, яка дуже велика в світі. Вона об'єднує, я думаю, зараз там більше 150 тисяч членів в десь 150 країнах світу. І, в принципі, це питання для етики було для Cfa Institute ще до всіх цих подій, про які я казав, воно було таке, я би завжди казав, number one. Навіть коли ми там здавали екзамен, воно етику, якщо ти здав все інше, але не здав етику, ти його не міг пройти. І особливо, і зараз ми бачимо, що це питання стає більше і більш важливим. І, в принципі, Cfa Institute через те, що займається цим дуже багато років, це не тільки останні 5-10 років, це там майже 30-40 років, коли все це питання по етиці було одним з головних. І, в принципі, Cfa Institute приймає участь в розробці окремих ініціатив в Сполучених Штатах, в Європі. І ми зараз також намагаємо зробити щось тут в країні, тому що і ми бачимо, що попит на це з'являється. Тобто раніше, наприклад, може такого не було, але західні партнери, західні інвестиції, вони хочуть побачити, що тут були правила гри, до яких вони звикли. На прикладі своєї компанії, в яку я працюю основний час, Dragon Capital, я бачу, що, наприклад, у нас були деякі угоди M&A, про які, може, ви чули, але, наприклад, там була конкуренція, коли було там 2, 3, 4 бажаючих придбати якийсь там об'єкт, а вибрали нас через те, що в нас була репутація, в нас були партнери, які цінуються, в яких є довіра, до яких є в світі. І, в принципі, при рівних інших умовах вибрали, наприклад, нашу компанію, що, в принципі, знову ж це фактор довіри і фактор того, що, в принципі, люди готові довіряти і грати за якимись правилами гри, до яких вони звикли. І, в принципі, Cfa Society Ukraine, ми впевнені, і Cfa Institute нас підтримує в цьому, що потрібно, щоб це запроваджувалося на рівні держави. Наприклад, у нас є чудова програма, ініціатива з Національної комісії цінних паперів та фондового ринку з точки зору того, щоб питання етики було запроваджено для навчання фахівців, працівників фондового ринку, для того, щоб поступово, крок за кроком, імплементація цього була в принципі, на рівні вже такої освіти базової, і вони могли це потім розуміли, як це можливо імплементувати в майбутньому. Тому сьогодні цей захід взагалі в нас буде дуже поважна, дуже досвідчена людина, яку ми презентуємо трішечки пізніше, що етика – це не взагалі якась абстракція. Тобто її використовують, є конкретні дуже багато прикладів, як це відбувається, як відрізнити, як можна відрізнити питання одне або інше, як це зробити найбільш правильним чином. І, в принципі, я думаю, це дуже, я сподіваюся, що ці декілька годин буде дуже зручними для всіх нас. І я не хочу дуже багато забирати часу, тому я хочу привітати і запросити до слова Максима Лібанова, члена Національної комісії цінних паперів та фондового ринку, наших партнерів цієї ініціативи. Будь ласка, Максиме.
Доброго дня, шановні колеги. Власне кажучи, питання етики, яке останнім часом, напевно, не дуже багато приділялося уваги як з боку держави, так і з боку саморегулівних організацій. Ми в комісії останнім часом, десь роки 2 чи 3, цим питанням почали займатися, тому що до цього часу нас превалювала думка, що, напевно, питання етики – це, напевно, має бути більше питання самовизначення, саморегулювання, і враховуючи, що у нас по всіх видах діяльності є відповідні саморегулівні організації, ми якось більше в цьому питанні покладалися саме на них, в тому плані, що стандарти етики, відповідні кодекси етичної поведінки мають бути розроблені асоціаціями і мають практично імплементовуватися, мати практичне застосування. Десь рік назад, може трошки більше, ми почали наш проєкт співпраці з Cfa Society Ukraine, да? Навіть 2 роки вже тому, да. 2 роки як меморандум підписали, ну і там рік активної співпраці. До чого ми хочемо прийти? Ми хочемо прийти до того, щоб всі, хто активно працює на ринку капіталу, щоб вони розуміли, що етична складова кожного робочого дня, вона не менш важлива, ніж професійна, не менш важлива, ніж відповідність законодавству, комплаєнс і таке інше. Тобто, фактично, ми хочемо досягти того рівня, коли кожна людина, яка там сидить на деску, або там, яка там здійснює якийсь портфоліо-менеджмент, щоб вона в своїй практичній діяльності керувалася не лише формальними вимогами законодавства, да? Але щоб вона керувалася і певними етичними принципами, які мають в тому числі фільтрувати певні дії, які, ну скажімо так, можуть бути там неналежним чином розтрактовані чи призвести до неналежних результатів. Да? І, власне кажучи, ми розуміємо, що для цього необхідно в першу чергу закласти фундамент, да? Тобто для цього треба взагалі закласти розуміння того, що таке є етичні стандарти, для цього треба закласти розуміння, як це має використовуватися на практиці. Ну і, власне кажучи, це одне з питань, яке привело нас до Cfa в Україні, тому що етичні стандарти Cfa, вони, ну, напевно, найбільш відомі в світі, і ті, які вже довели свою практичну значимість і можливість практичного застосування. Тому, власне кажучи, ми зараз працюємо над тим, щоб трошки підсилити законодавче регулювання цього питання, тобто, щоб ми перейшли з повністю soft law, коли це питання повністю регулюється якимись стандартами саморегулювання, до певних мінімальних вимог з сторони держави. Яким чином це буде зроблено? Ну, скоріш за все, що ми прийдемо до того, що частина питань, які мають бути перевірені при допуску на ринок, це має бути питання етики. Тому що, як ви знаєте, те, що у нас є зараз, фактично, для того, щоб отримати право на роботу на фондовому ринку, ти маєш пройти відповідну атестацію, де фактично 95% питань – це питання на знання законодавства. Тобто на даний час, фактично, якщо ти знаєш законодавство, то ти фактично вже далі можеш йти працювати на ринок. Ми хочемо трошки тут змінити цю структуру і додати більшу вагу цим питанням етики, для того, щоб ми були впевнені, причому не тільки ми, як держава, як регулятор, ну і споживачі, учасники ринку, щоб вони були впевнені в тому, що та людина, яка буде надавати їм певні послуги інвестиційні, що вона має такий мінімальний рівень етичний стосовно того, що вона не буде робити те, що робити не треба, навіть якщо воно формально вписується в вимоги законодавства. І, власне кажучи, через це ми раді вітати ініціативи, які є в Cfa, і в тому числі на цьому заході. Я сподіваюся, що він буде дуже цікавим точки зору як теоретичної, як етичні стандарти є, як вони мають бути, так і їх практичного застосування в повсякденній діяльності компанії. Власне кажучи, на цьому не хочу більше забирати часу і з радістю передаю слово далі.
Да, і я, в принципі, дуже дякую Максиму за виступ. І хочу, для мене буде честь запросити до мікрофону нашого партнера, директора Cfa Інституту з питань етики і професійних стандартів Майкла Макміллана. Він є, в принципі, номер один людина з точки зору питання етики в Cfa Інституті. І, в принципі, він виступає по всьому світу, дуже досвідчений. Але він допомагає з питання професійних стандартів, етика не тільки в Cfa Інституті, але і investment professionals по всьому світі. Але головне, що я хочу сказати, що ми запрошували Майкла вже декілька разів в Україну і, в принципі, як були присутні на конференціях Cfa Інституту по світу, не знаю, в Гонконгу, в Америці. Це, окрім того, до цього, коли, наприклад, я сам здавав етику, я думав, що це дуже витрачає час і трішечки скучно. А коли про це розповідає Майк, це дуже цікаво, дуже інтерактивно і практично. Тому, в принципі, я думаю, що ці, не знаю, скільки там, година-півтори години, скільки заплановано, я думаю, це буде дуже цікаво. Майк, please welcome, and we'll start with the floor is yours now. Okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. We have interpreters, so I plan on speaking slowly and carefully. I hope everyone can understand me. Yes? Good. All right. Well, thank you for having me today. I am from the Cfa Institute. I'm curious, how many of you are Cfa charter holders in the audience? Good. How many of you are candidates for the Cfa charter? Nobody? Okay, that's all right. Well, thank you, charter holders, for coming, and you will also get continuing education credit for this session. So, here we go. As you may know, 2018 represents the 10th year since the financial crisis. And up until the financial crisis, the mission of Cfa Institute was to lead the investment profession globally by promoting the highest standards of ethics, education, and professional excellence. That's where our mission was for the first 50 years. After the financial crisis, we added that last line for the ultimate benefit of society. Because if you think about it, it truly was society that suffered as a result of the financial crisis. People lost their homes, people lost their jobs, and even more people lost their life savings. So at Cfa Institute, we thought that if we can raise the educational level of investment professionals in our industry, and if we're able to increase the ethical behavior of investment professionals in our industry, that is what will ultimately benefit society. So that's why we added that to our mission statement. So when it comes to ethical behavior, this is how we view it. Ethical behavior is doing the right thing when no one else is watching, even when doing the wrong thing is legal. One of the reasons why there's been such anger directed at investment professionals all over the world is because so many of the activities that led up to the financial crisis were legal, but they weren't ethical. And as you all may be aware, the law really represents the minimum standard that we all must follow. Ethics represents a much higher standard. And to this end, in 1963, we awarded the first CFA charter. There were 284 people who sat for the exam, and the pass rate was 94%. Last year, 2018, there were 315,000 people who sat for all 3 levels of the CFA exam. Why has there been such growth and interest in the designation? I think principally because of the ethics component. Ethics represents 10 to 15% of every level of the CFA exam. And as CFA charter holders, we have to sign a statement every single year saying that we have lived up to and followed the CFA Code of Ethics and Standards of Professional Conduct. So when employers are hiring people, they like to look at CFA charter holders because it doesn't guarantee that we're going to do everything completely correct, but they know that we've studied ethics and they know that we have to live by our Code of Ethics and Standards of Professional Conduct. So this is how we define ethics at CFA Institute. It begins with education. Investment professionals not only need to understand investments and finance, but they also need to understand the laws, rules, and regulations in the jurisdictions in which they're doing business. So ethics has got to begin with education. Then ethics requires thinking. Thinking about honesty, integrity, character, and stewardship. Let me explain what I mean by stewardship. Think about the last time you went to the doctor. I'm just curious, who's been to the doctor in the past 6 months? Raise your hand, anybody? Great, all right, healthy lady. But when you went to the doctor, think about the last time you went. You went because you weren't feeling well. So you go to the doctor and you tell him or her what's bothering you. They ask you a series of questions, and then they prescribe some course of action that you need to follow. They either prescribe pills or something else. But as you were think about when you were listening to that doctor tell you what you needed to do. I'm sure there was never a doubt in your mind that what that doctor was telling you to do was solely in your best interest. Am I correct? We trust our doctor. We don't know perhaps a lot about medicine, but we believe that what our doctor is telling us to do is in our best interest. As investment professionals, we are stewards of our clients' money. They are entrusting that money to us, and in return, they expect us to carefully and responsibly manage that money solely in their best interest. So, here's what we're going to do today. On the CFA exam, or most exams that you may have taken in the past, and you've had ethics questions, every question that you were asked to answer had one right answer and perhaps 2 or 3 wrong answers. But in real life, most ethical dilemmas don't have clear right or wrong answers. They fall into a gray area. So I thought what we would do today is this. Investment professionals have told me a number of ethical dilemmas, real life ethical dilemmas that they have experienced. So I'm going to place you in those ethical dilemmas, and then I'm going to ask you to vote. What would you do if you were in that particular situation? Now, in most presentations, the presenter asks you to put away your cell phone, put away your laptop or your electrical device. I'm actually going to ask you to get out that device, because I'm going to show you a case, and then you're going to use your cell phone to vote. what would you do in this situation? So if you could go to this website and then put in this code, W626. All right, when you log in, I'm going to flip the screen and show you the first case, and then you can vote afterwards. Is everybody with me? Okay. All right, here we go. All right, so true story. Your boss who hired you and has mentored you for the past 3 years is being unfairly let go because of office politics. It is being unfairly let go at the end of the month because of office politics. As the sole support of her family, she is concerned about finding another job. For the past week, you have observed her making copies of the research reports and marketing presentations that she wrote and spreadsheet models that she created. She then places them in her briefcase before going home. When you ask her why she is doing this, she replies that she will need to show prospective employers examples of her work. So what would you do in this situation? Would you A, do nothing? Would you B, help her copy the files? Would you C, give her a thumb drive to copy the files? Or D, would you tell her that you will email her the files after she leaves? So I'm going to give it a minute for you to talk about it and then ask you to vote. Okay, let's see. You can go ahead and vote. Yeah, there you are. Okay. Now, let me ask you, do you think, or is there an ethical issue in this particular case? Anybody want to raise their hand and tell me, do you think there's an ethical issue here? Well, here is the issue. All of the files that she is copying and taking with her are the property of the company that she works for. So what you're actually watching her do is to steal company property. Now, what I find so interesting here is that, and again, there's no right or wrong answer at all, so don't worry about it, is that 37% of the people would say nothing. And my question is, if you saw her, and again, I'm not making a judgment, but if you saw her take a laptop or take a computer, a screen and the keyboard, and put it in her car, would you say the same thing? So are you not as guilty as she is by observing this crime and not saying anything about it? All right, so that's 35% of you. 5% of you would help her copy the files. Well, good, that's nice of you. 15% would give her a thumb drive and say, don't worry about copying the files. It's easier and quicker. It's easier to steal the property just by putting it on a thumb drive. And then, okay, oops. Sorry about that. Okay. And then 45% of you would tell her that you would email her files. Okay, so here's the issue with this particular case. In the real situation, this person did nothing. They knew what she was doing, what they observed their boss doing was wrong, but they still did nothing. And why is that? Well, let's go back to the case. Okay. Many people would not do anything because of this. First of all, this person is your boss. So would you tell on your boss? The second reason is this. This is a person who has hired you and has mentored you for the past 3 years. So here's somebody who supported you. Would you feel like having to turn them in because you've observed them doing something wrong? You know she's being unfairly let go because of office politics. So in some ways you feel sorry for her too. In some ways you may be angry at the company for letting her go this way. So you're like, go ahead, steal the property. I don't care. You deserve it. And then it says she's the sole supporter of her family. She's concerned about finding another job. Again, there's the sympathy about this. And here's one of the key lessons from this particular case. We often make most of our decisions instantly and instinctively rather than rationally and using reason. So we see somebody do something and we instinctively said, I'm not getting involved, I'm not going to do anything, first of all. Second is, we tend to believe that we are more ethical than we really are. All right, so here's my question. How many of you drove your car here today? Did anybody drive here? How many of you think that you are better drivers than 95% of the people on the road? Right? Yes? All right. This is a dangerous question. How many of you think that you're more ethical than many of the people out there? Okay. All right. More importantly, and this is the point of my presentation, is this. We often make unethical decisions, not because we are bad people, but because we're often affected by psychological biases, social and organizational factors, and situational influences. This is what affects our decision making. So here's the key point I want to make is there is a big difference between unethical people and unethical behavior. Good people often make unethical decisions because they think they're doing something to help someone. In the last example, there's a lot of emotion there. Although you were watching someone steal company property, many people said they would either help her or they would let her go ahead and steal it. Why? Because you actually think that you're helping this person. Am I correct? All right, so here's some of the factors that can lead even good people to make unethical decisions. One is obedience to authority. Our boss tells us to do something and we do it. and we often don't question the ethical issues surrounding what our boss is asking us to do. So obedience to authority can affect us. Conformity bias, we have a tendency to follow the crowd. If we see everybody else doing something, we do it as well. Again, without thinking about what are the ethical issues surrounding what all of these other people are doing. The third one is incrementalism, that gradual shift toward unethical behavior. Have you ever heard of the boiling frog syndrome? All right, for those of you who have not, here's the issue. If you take a frog and you put it in boiling water, it will immediately jump out because it can feel how hot the water is. But if you put a frog in cold water and then slowly turn up the heat, the frog will eventually boil to death. Why? Because the frog won't be able to feel the gradual change in temperature. And this is the same way when you do with unethical behavior. Sometimes people start off doing something small and something minor, and then it gets worse and worse and worse. And they don't really see how what they're doing is getting worse and worse. Or people work in an environment where they observe others doing small things that are unethical. And then they don't really sense how the seriousness of the unethical behavior is growing over time. So incrementalism. And then this last one, which is very dangerous, is overconfidence. Our feeling that I'm more ethical than they are, it won't happen to me. And this is particularly dangerous because if you're so confident in your own ethics, it means that you're not stopping and thinking about the consequences or the perceptions of what you are about to do before you do them. So these are just some of the factors that can cause good people to do unethical things. I like this quote. Situational influences have more to do with unethical behavior than a person's character. Under the right conditions, good people, and I mean all of us in this room, can be induced, seduced, and initiated to act unethically. If you look at that last case that we just did, that last case dealt with your boss, someone who was very nice to you, someone who you believed was being treated unfairly. When I've been working with college students, I use a similar case as that. The only difference is in the other case, the person who you observe taking company property is not your boss, is not a friend of yours, is not someone that you know. And when you ask people what they would do, they immediately say, oh, I would do something. I would say something. I would go to compliance or whatever. So it just means that if we know people, or if we have some kind of relationship with them, we're more willing to allow them to do things that are unethical than if we didn't know them. Situational influences. All right, so here's our next situation. Another true story. You recently started a new job as a senior portfolio manager at a pension fund. Previously, you were an analyst for a private equity firm where your last assignment was to analyze Gates, a private biotechnology company. While conducting due diligence on Gates, you learned that the company was completing clinical trials for a vaccine that will prevent a number of diseases. Now, the analysts on your team at the pension fund tell you that they plan to invest in Biomed, a publicly traded competitor of Gates. You believe that the vaccine Gates is developing will have a detrimental impact on Biomed stock. So what should you do? And as a matter of fact, I'm going to change this question. Instead of asking you what should you do in this situation, I'm going to ask you what would you do in this situation? Because there's a big difference between should and would. So A, would you say nothing because you in fact did sign a non-disclosure agreement when you left the private equity firm? Would you place Biomed on the fund's restricted list, meaning that preventing anyone from investing in Biomed? Would you C, discourage the team from investing in Biomed without telling them what you know? Or D, would you tell the analysts everything you know about Gates? Now, before answering or voting on this, ask yourself, in this situation, to whom do you owe a duty to? Do you owe a duty to your previous employer, the private equity firm? Do you owe a duty to your current employer, the pension fund? Or do you owe a duty to the clients, the beneficiaries, etc., who will be investing their money in Biomed through the pension fund? So I'm going to ask you to vote on this. All right. Okay, so the issue in this particular circumstance is that you are in possession of material non-public information. Would you agree? You are in possession of material non-public information. So, and by the way, I can defend every single one of these choices, so that's okay. So 16% of you said you would say nothing. May I ask who said they would say nothing? All right, gentleman in the back. Are you a regulator, sir? Yes. Okay, all right, sir, but I'll tell you, here's the scenario. You say nothing. The analysts love Biomed. So what do? They invest 4% of the portfolio in Biomed. You say nothing. You go, go right ahead. So 3 weeks later, maybe a month later, Gates comes out with the vaccine. Biomed stock plunges. There goes the performance of the pension fund. There goes your bonus for the year. There goes your children's education, perhaps. But you're going to say nothing. Okay, that's fine. Now, I'm going to go down to D. 37% of you would tell the analyst everything that you know. Now, because we have a regulator in the back of the room, I'm not going to ask you who said D. But anyway, now, if you tell the analyst everything you know, you are going to reveal material non-public information to them. Is that right? Okay, but the argument could be that you owe a duty to the clients and the mutual fund and the pension fund. Okay? Now, here's the question. If you tell the analysts everything that you know, they won't buy biomed. Is that correct? Because you'll say, they're coming out with a vaccine, one of your competitors. But, so the analysts decide not to buy biomed. But would you ever get in trouble for telling the analysts everything that you know? Would the regulator ever come knocking on your door about this? And I would say probably not, because most regulators are looking for people who use material non-public information to do something. You are using this material non-public information to prevent the analyst from doing something. So I'm not saying this is correct. I'm just saying, would you get into trouble for this? Probably not. That still does not make it correct, okay? So 32% of you said you would discourage the team from investing in biomed. Well, how are you going to discourage the team without telling them what you know? Right? You're just going to go. How are you going to discourage them? Because remember, let's assume these analysts are CFA charter holders. So they've used reasonable care and prudent judgment, researching all available public information, and they've decided this is the company that we want to invest in, right? So it's going to be hard to discourage them. So the last choice is you're placing biomed on the firm's restricted list. Well, isn't in some ways that's the same way of you're using your material non-public information to prevent them from doing something that they wanted? Isn't that sort of illegal or inappropriate as well? Right? Because I'm sure all of the other investors out there wish that you could put biomed on their personal restricted list so they wouldn't do the same thing. So does anybody have an appropriate response? Is there an answer E out there perhaps that you might choose? Yes?
I would still say B, but plus consulting with compliance office on those actions.
Okay, so you would still say B, but consult with compliance, okay? And I have to tell you, that's actually very close to what happened. This individual realized that they were in a no-win situation. In the US, we call it where you're between a rock and a hard place. Do you have that expression here? Doesn't matter. Anyway, so this person realized that they were in a very difficult situation. So they went to compliance. And without telling compliance the details, they said, I have negative information, or I have information that could have a negative impact on one of the stocks that the analysts want to buy. What should I do? So the compliance department met. They also met with the legal department, And it was the compliance department in conjunction with the legal department that decided to place biomed on the firm's restricted list. So it wasn't you who did it, it was the compliance department, which is a good thing, or not necessarily. Now, here's the point. Many regulators and others do not like what happened. Yes, sir?
Question. If the guy didn't say what specific company he knew that information about, how did they put specific company on the restricted list?
Oh, okay, so no, the individual said, the analysts want to buy biomed. I have negative information about that could have a bad impact upon biomed. That's what they said, yes, yes. I have used this case at a number of different companies and different institutions. Some institutions said, we have been in the exact same situation, and we've just let the analysts go ahead and buy the stock, even though we had negative information about it, because that would be using material non-public information to benefit us at the expense of other investors out there. And many regulators don't like what this company did either, because again, they prevented there was information that was used that other people didn't have that prevented them from making a mistake, although other investors out there would have liked to have had that same information. Okay? All right, so we'll go on. So I like this cartoon. And the cartoon says, run this by the legal department, but run super fast so the ethics department doesn't see it. And it basically emphasizes what I said earlier. There's a big difference between the law and ethics. The law tells us what we can and cannot do. Ethics really focuses upon what we should and should not do. So, compliance. You know, we've read recently about a number of money laundering scandals concerning huge banks all over the world, right? There's been Wells Fargo, there's Deutsche Bank, there's this Danske Bank in Estonia, all of these money laundering stories, right? But what always gets to me is, since the financial crisis in 2008, every single bank and financial institution has doubled the size of their compliance department. Compliance people are very smart and very capable people, yet we still see these scandals continuing, which means that it's not compliance that's needed, although it's very important. There's more of a cultural issue within the organization that has to be established. And as that previous cartoon shows, a lot of companies are doing things to circumvent the compliance department because they know the compliance department would say, no, you can't do that. That is illegal, all right? So, you often hear that expression, tone at the top. And I certainly think it's very important to have leaders, CEOs, presidents of companies to be ethical. But equally as important, it requires tone at the middle. My supervisor, my manager, because no matter how ethical the head of my company is, I don't come into contact with that person on a daily basis. Who I do come in contact with is my immediate supervisor or manager. And if that person is doing things that are unethical or encouraging me to do things that are unethical, that's where the problem lies. Right? Any questions or comments about anything I've said so far? All right. So here's some fundamental ethical principles that I think all professionals, not just investment professionals, but lawyers, doctors, accountants should follow. We should always put our client interest first. That should be the primary thing we do. It's important for us to maintain our independence and objectivity, which means that, accepting gifts or other favors, we probably shouldn't do, because although it may not affect our opinion, it may affect people's perceptions of what our opinions are. And we live in a world today where perceptions are more damning than the actual reality of it. We should always try to avoid conflicts of interest, but some conflicts of interest we can't avoid, in which case we need to manage that conflict. And the best way to manage a conflict of interest is through full and fair disclosure. So our client or our employer can make an informed decision. We live in a world of social media and the internet, so preservation of confidentiality is very, very important and is becoming more important as we go on. We must deal fairly with all of our clients. We can't favor some clients at the expense of others. And whenever we're making investment recommendations or conducting analysis, it's important for us to use reasonable care and prudent judgment. So, there is our CFA Institute code and standards, and basically our code and standards summarizes or encapsulates those 7 principles that I just talked about earlier. So here's our next situation. You are a securities analyst at a pension fund. One day you have lunch with a friend who's the executive assistant to the president of microtechnology. During lunch, your friend tells you that she has been working late because her boss has been meeting with the president of Pambex Systems. So after lunch, after returning to your office, you learn that Pambex is rumored to be a takeover target. So you purchase shares of the company for your personal portfolio. Later in the day, you tell your boss about the conversation that you had with your friend. Your boss observes that there has been heavy buying of Pambex shares recently, so he purchases shares of Pambex for the fund. So here's the question. You or your boss have purchased shares in Pambex. A, you and your boss were free to purchase shares. B, only you should have purchased shares. C, only your boss should have purchased shares. Or D, neither you nor your boss should have purchased shares in Pambex. So I'm going to ask you to vote. All right. we? Okay. So, let's see how the votes are still coming in. All right. So, how many of you think that this case revolves around material, non-public information? Raise your hand. No? Okay. All right. Yes. All right. So let's see. What do you think is the material, non-public information? Is it the fact that they are having lunch or they've been meeting late at night? What exactly is the material, non-public information? All right. So here's the situation. Is everyone familiar with Elon Musk? He's the former president of Tesla, right? And is everyone familiar with Jeff Bezos, who's the president of Amazon, right? So if I told you, oh man, I've been working late because Elon and Jeff have been meeting late at night, would you go out and buy invest in either one of those companies just based upon they've been meeting late at night? Probably not. But then if you go back to your office and you see this rumor on the internet that says Amazon is interested in purchasing Tesla, you would say, oh, I'm going to take that piece of information I learned about them having lunch, and then I'm going to combine it with this rumor. Is everybody with me on that? Now, I'm going to put the CFA charter holders on the spot. What do we call that? What do we call that? Yes, sir.
Mosaic Theory.
The Mosaic Theory. See, I knew it every time. All right, so here's the situation. The fact that these two individuals are meeting is non-public information, but it's not material because just knowing that piece of information is not going to make you act. So you've taken non-material, non-public information and then combined it with the rumor, which is public. And that is the Mosaic Theory, which says that you can use non-public information as long as it's not material and combine it with public information to make a decision. Now, this is where the regulator comes in, because let's suppose you go back to your office and go, I think I can invest in this, in Pambeck Systems. So you buy Pambeck Systems for your personal portfolio. 3 days later, the takeover is announced and your stock goes through the roof. Now, in the US, our regulator is the Securities and Exchange Commission. And they would find it very suspicious that you bought Pambeck shares 2 or 3 days before the takeover was announced. So what they would do is they would send you a letter, and the letter is called a Wells Notice. And the letter says, can you come down to our office, and you may want to bring a lawyer with you, so that you can explain to us why you just so happen to buy this stock. So, you get a lawyer, you have to tell your boss, you have to tell your company, and probably the regulator is going to charge you with insider trading. So what's going to happen? The pension fund is probably going to fire you. And then instead of hiring one lawyer, you're going to hire an army of lawyers to fight this suit. And there goes all of that money that you just earned on this stock. 6 months later, 9 months later, after going to court, The regulator says, you know, I think you're right. That was the Mosaic Theory. You're not guilty. Now what do? You take that not guilty verdict, you staple it to your resume, and you start looking for another job. Do you think anybody is going to want to hire you after that? Probably not. So here's an example where you actually won the war, but you lost the battle. Okay? Something to keep in mind. Now, two other issues with this particular case. One is front running. Have you ever heard of the term front running? That occurs when you buy a security for your personal portfolio in front of your clients buying that same security. In this particular case, I don't really think it is front running because you just happen to mention your conversation to the boss without ever thinking that he is going to buy this stock for the fund. So maybe not. Have you ever heard of Warren Buffett, who owns Berkshire Hathaway? He's a big billionaire in the United States. Well, his second in command a couple of years ago was a gentleman by the name of David Sokoloff. He was the second in command at Berkshire Hathaway. So David purchased stock in his own personal portfolio of a company called Lubrizol. It was an oil company. Bought it, enjoyed it, whatever. A couple of months later, he has lunch with Warren Buffett. And over lunch, during a conversation, he tells Warren Buffett, oh, I invested in this company, Lubrizol. It's a really great company. I think it has good growth prospects, etc. After lunch, they leave. And about 3 months later, Warren Buffett buys Lubrizol for Berkshire Hathaway. Well, it comes out in the news that David Sokol owned shares in Lubrizol before Warren Buffett bought it. Big headlines, lots of, negative press, etc. And David Sokol is forced to resign from Berkshire Hathaway. And to this day, David Sokol has never been charged with a crime or anything else. It just looked bad. And so anytime we do anything, although we may be comfortable with feeling that what we're doing is legal, we always have to stop and think about how are other people going to perceive what we're doing. Because as I said to you earlier, perceptions can be as damning, if not more damning than reality is. So that's front running. Last thing is, some people said, well, should the boss have bought this Pambex for, let's get this out of the way. So should the boss have bought Pambex shares for the pension fund? And I'd say probably not, because he hasn't really done a lot of research with the pen. All he does is he hears the rumor about Pambex, sees that there's heavy buying, and is that enough reason to invest money in a company? Some would say probably not. All right, so anyway. Rationalizations. We use rationalizations to justify our reasons for not taking the right course of action. So here's an example. Why didn't you say anything when you saw your boss copying and stealing company property? You rationalize it because you kind of feel guilty about it, but you rationalize it by saying, well, she hired and mentored me. Or she's being unfairly let go, or she needs this material to find another job. Rationalizations provide the justifications or reasons for not taking the right course of action. We use rationalizations to neutralize ethical intent by reducing the negative effect that accompanies performing an unethical act. We use rationalizations to justify behavior that is inconsistent with our own opinions of ourselves. And lastly, we use rationalizations to change our perception of a situation or social environment to defend or excuse our behavior. So here's a quote, which I think is a great one. There's never been an act done since the beginning, from a kid stealing candy to a dictator committing genocide, that the person doing it didn't think he was fully justified. That's a mental trick called rationalizing, and it's done the human race more harm than anything else you can name. So here's some common rationalizations. Everybody else does it, so it must be okay. That's the way they do it at firm X. So if they're doing it at that firm, why can't we do it at our firm? If we don't do it, somebody else will. This is the way it's always been done. So why don't we keep on doing it? It doesn't really hurt anyone. It's not a big deal. My favorite, he or she deserved it. It's not my responsibility. And this last one, that newer or younger entrants into our industry are most susceptible to, is this need to belong. I want to be a team player. I want to be loyal. And if you look at anyone who has been prosecuted as a result of the financial crisis, whether it was in London, whether it was in the US or anywhere else, most of the people who have been prosecuted have been young. They've been in their late 20s or their early 30s. And these are people who've been quite successful, but they were obeying their bosses, they were being supported, they were doing whatever. So it's always the younger people who sort of get in trouble. They're the ones who are being exploited, not their bosses. So I'm going to wrap up here, but I want you to say, how can you resolve an ethical dilemma? Well, the first thing you need to do is acknowledge, hey, there is an ethical dilemma. See that there is a problem. Determine who is faced with and owns the problem. In the case of the files, you weren't the one who was stealing the company property, but the fact that you saw someone steal it and didn't say anything, that then became your problem. And in many firms now in the United States, if you see someone committing a crime or doing something unethical, don't report them, you can get in as much trouble as they are, because the firm feels you're as guilty as they are if you didn't step up and say anything and report it when you saw something being done that was inappropriate. So, gather the relevant data. In the case of the Pambex case, ask yourself, is this material non-public information? Isn't. So get the facts, find out what you're dealing with. When I say test the wrong versus right parameters, ask yourself, is this legal? Can I do this? Can I not do this? When I say test for right versus right paradigm, ask yourself, is this ethical? Should I do this or should I not do this? I have to tell you one quick story. I was doing an ethics workshop at an investment firm, and this investment firm really wanted to create a culture of ethics in the firm. So what they did was, whenever they would hold an investment committee meeting in a boardroom, they would always leave one seat empty. And that empty seat was to represent the client. So anytime they had a discussion, they wanted it to say, would we still be having this discussion or saying these things if the client was sitting right there? And that was just one tool that they used to try and keep that client-centered, client-focused attitude in all of their decision-making. So, apply the resolution principles. Ask yourself, am I putting my client interest first? Is this affecting my independence and objectivity? Am I fully and fairly disclosing everything my client or my firm needs to know to make an informed decision? Yeah, apply the resolution. Investigate third way options, compromise. You know, one of the things we're also trying to do when we work with firms at Cfa Institute is try and sort of improve the image of the compliance departments. In many organizations, compliance departments are like the police, and people hate going to them and they go, oh, I'm going to get in trouble, etc. But in most organizations, the purpose of compliance is also to help people stay out of trouble. And that's what they're there for, is when you do have difficult situations, to call upon them and let them handle it as opposed to you handling it in some way or the other. So investigate third way options, make a decision, and reflect on what you've learned from the decision. And I'm going to leave you with this one last quote. It's from Warren Buffett, who said, I want employees to ask themselves whether they are willing to have any contemplated act appear the next day on the front page of their local paper to be read by their spouses, children, and friends, with the reporting done by an informed and critical reporter. Right? So, thank you all very much. Thanks. Any questions or anything? Yes.
You mentioned compliance office.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
In our country, compliance could be. My question is about subordination of compliance office, and the response of the compliance office if it is subordinated to the executive line of the company.
Yes.
And in my experience, not always compliance is doing right things because of this subordination.
Mm-hmm.
And the CEO or executive line could influence the behavior of compliance office.
Exactly right.
How it is better to deal with this issue?
In many organizations are now changing. No, keep it unless somebody else has a question. And many organizations are now changing specifically for that reason. So now the compliance department reports to the board of directors or someone designated on the board of directors, so that if you are in the compliance department and you see an officer like the vice president or someone else doing something wrong, you have an independent person who you can report this to. So in many organizations now, the compliance department no longer reports directly to the president or the CEO. There is the general counsel, the lawyer, the legal department, or the board of directors is where they report directly to, so that any decisions that they make are not influenced by the president or the CEO. But I know that's not the case in many organizations, not only here as an example, but also in the United States or whatever. But best practices now for any organization and in terms of corporate governance as well, is you go into a company, the first question that they ask is, who does the compliance department report to? And if a company says, oh, we really want to support ethics, etc., but the compliance department is not independent, then you know that they're not really serious about it. Very good question. Yes.
First of all, thank you for a great presentation and inspiration we got. And my question is, recently we saw that some departments responsible for compliance and integrity were recalled as the ethics department. Is it right to change this name? What is more better for you?
Okay. Yes, I think that there is a difference, as I was showing earlier, between ethics and compliance. The job of compliance is to make sure that people are following the rules and regulations, right? And that's it. That's really, ethics really takes it a step further. As I said, compliance can tell you, yes, you can do this. Ethics will ask, even though you can do it, should you do it? And that's a different question. So there is a difference. And as I said to you earlier, banks are still doing things that are wrong. They're still laundering money. They're still doing all these other things, even if there is a compliance department. And then sometimes people are circumventing the compliance department. But in other circumstances, the compliance department says, this is legal, you can do it. And that doesn't mean that you should do it, you know? Just another quick story. Do you remember Enron Corporation, the oil company that went bankrupt back in 2000? Well, one of the people involved in Enron, their CFO, Andrew Fastow, is someone who I've gotten to know over the years because we've done a number of speaking engagements together. Two things about this. Andrew Fastow won the CFO of the Year, was awarded CFO of the Year in 1999. Maybe it was 2000, I don't know, for all of the financial engineering that he was doing. In 2001, he went to jail for the same things that he won CFO of the Year for, because the problem was he would ask the lawyers, is this legal? And the lawyers would respond, well, it's not illegal, which is a completely different thing. And then he'd ask the accountants, oh, can I do this? And they go, well, as long as you're following generally accepted accounting principles, you can do it. But again, that's not the right answer. So everybody told him, yeah, you can do it. And then he found out he couldn't. That's the first thing. The second thing is, as I said to you before, having gotten to know Andrew over the past 3 years, I have to say he's like a normal person, in the sense that he has a wife, he has children and families or whatever. We sometimes have a tendency to demonize people who do the wrong thing. And I'm not here to say, oh, Andrew is a perfect person or so, but what I'm saying is that people who do unethical things are normal, just like we all are. You know what I mean? It's not like he has a tail and horns and a pitchfork or whatever. He did do the wrong thing, no doubt about it. But again, he's kind of like everybody else out there. Yeah. Anybody else have questions? All right. Yes.
Unfortunately, in our country, promoting ethical and professional behavior, honesty is a bit challenging, because we have cases of billions bankruptcy like Maria case, avant-garde, close to this stage. And the people who did things which led to bankruptcy and loss of money were not having negative results.
Right.
And still these people are part of the society, and this society sees these examples, and there is no anything preventing such cases in the future.
Okay.
What would you advise, and what is the experience of other countries when persecution and other barriers or examples how to behave better are not working?
Okay, you know, it's been my pleasure to have the opportunity to travel all over the world with Cfa Institute. I've been to Latin America, I've been to Argentina, I've been to Nigeria, I've been to all of these, many countries. And people always say to me, well, in my country, things are not this way, or we're not this whatever, like you just said. And my response is, have you read the papers lately to see what's going on in the US? So the US is not this paragon of virtue. And as I started off saying earlier, there were a lot of people and a lot of activities that precipitated the financial crisis and the banking crisis in the United States. And many of those people are still leading corporations, are still running banks and everything else. So it's not, I know maybe here it's a little bit more extreme, but I do have to say, unfortunately, that these things go on everywhere, you know, and unfortunately there are people who get away with it, you know? Yeah. I don't know if that's the right answer, but it's just the reality of it. Yes. Sorry about that, but yes. Anything else? All right. Well, I will be around, so if you have questions or comments or anything else like that, please see me afterwards. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Michael, for the workshop. Дорогі гості, я думаю, що зараз ми можемо зробити десь 30 хвилин перерву, і об 11:15 ми чекаємо вас тут знову, і наші представники фондового ринку та представники саморегулівних асоціацій будуть мати певну дискусію щодо імплементації етичних принципів в Україні. Дуже дякую вам.